Hi, I'm Non from My Authentic Style, and this channel is dedicated to helping you find your authentic style. In this video, I'll be discussing the Kibbe Soft Gamine, the body type, the style profile, and at the end, I'll be sharing a sample wardrobe for this type. As usual, this video assumes that you've taken the Kibbe body type test and you've determined your type to be soft gamine. If you haven't, you can go a few videos back where I take you through the test as well as the sample answers. For a soft gamine, a sample answer sheet may look something like this. So it's a mix of A and B, a mix of yin and yang, but not blended together, just almost an arbitrary mix and almost equal in number with a little bit more yin, a little bit more roundedness and softness. Your position on the yin yang scale is a combination of opposites with extra yin. So physically, you are yin in size, meaning petite, and shape, curvy flesh, and rounded features, and slightly yang in your bone structure. So there's an angular skeleton, and on top of that is all this soft flesh, typically. And now let's discuss the Kibbe soft gamine body type. Kibbe has characterized this body type as Spitfire chic, but it's important to note that every soft gamine woman will look slightly different. It's the mix of yang and yin with an additional bit of yin that makes a soft gamine. How this shows up and how this looks on different people will look slightly different. Often, though, this body type tends towards a fleshiness with a soft, curvy shape. Height. Under 5 foot 5 inches, usually very petite. Body type. Soft, curvy body that tends toward fleshiness. Curved bust line and hips with some natural waist definition. Arms and legs tend to be soft and fleshy, particularly through the hip and thigh areas. Bone structure. Delicate and small, yet slightly broad and angular. Angular edges, particularly through the shoulders, which can be square or tapered. Small hands and feet, may be slightly wide or fleshy. Delicately broad facial contours, as seen in the nose, cheekbones, and jawline, which may have extra bits of angularity. Arms and legs tend to be shortish in proportion to height. So these three women, I think, represent this well, and with enough diversity and variation between them. For all of these women, a key standout characteristic is the small stature. So they all do look petite. Their limbs are very short, how their arms look, and just their entire proportionality. Those are small, petite people. In all of them, I see that sharpness. So there's that bit of angularity. I think, particularly in Halle Berry's case, the way that she's posing helps to amplify it, but you can really see just how sharp her elbow is there. Also, at her shoulder, there's just sharpness to her features where I feel like a ruler could be used to kind of outline that. So that's that angularity. But she obviously has that softness atop that, and she has that beautiful, curvy, hourglass like figure. Reese Witherspoon, to the left of her, likewise, but she has a little bit more of that plushness, so a bit more additional yin as compared to Halle Berry. But even for her, I see that sharpness in her bone structure, and then that flesh is there and it's giving her that beautiful shaping, and she has a wonderful figure. And then in Octavia's case, you can see that she has more weight to her, so there's more space for the softness to show up, and you can really see in how well defined and how curvy her figure is. But even for her, what I see first is that she is a petite person. I can tell that that is a tiny woman in terms of just height and proportionality. And then she has a lot of that additional lushness, and they all have that curve to them, that softness, and still that angularity. Even in Octavia's case, when I look at her legs, at her shin where her dress stops, I can see sharpness in that, but she carries a lot more softness even on her face and everywhere else on her body. So great variation amongst these three. Facial features. Doll-like facial features, saucer eyes, round and fleshy cheeks, full lips. Facial shape may be very rounded, and it can have a slightly sharp or slightly strong jawline. Coloring. Any coloring is possible, warm or cool, but gamines are usually distinct or vivid in coloration. Moderate to high contrast coloring is often the case. Hair. Any type is possible, but texture is usually soft to silky if fine, wispy if thick, and curly or wavy. So again, I'll reiterate that any coloring and any hair texture is possible for anybody within any body type. That's my belief. If overweight, body tends to get very rounded as the weight collects mainly in the bust and hip areas. Arms and thighs may get very soft, and face tends to become quite fleshy. It is common for soft gamines to feel overweight even when they aren't because of the extreme round shape of the body paired with the short limbs. So here we have Reese Witherspoon, and you can see here that she's at a great weight, and you can also see that because of her body type, she carries that additional softness to her, even at this low weight. So there's a lot of fleshiness and softness that is visible through her stomach area, through her upper thigh area, and I can also see that angularity a little bit. So you can see that structure behind her, but that softness is additional and is slightly more overpowering than the angularity of her. And we see her again here. She looks absolutely wonderful. You can see that great shaping again through those one pieces, and it just speaks to her curvy shape because it's still very visible even though her entire midsection is covered up. And I think both of these suit her incredibly well. Weight wise, she probably has the same weight as she does in the first two images where she's in the blue bikini. But I think because she's wearing one pieces and it covers up her midsection, which when she wears it allows us to see that additional softness, the overall image is almost that of somebody who is more lean because we don't visually see the softness that we would in her midsection. So interestingly, I almost feel like wearing a one piece makes her look slimmer. That could be something that's interesting for people of this body type if your composition is similar to Reese's. I really, really love how she looks in the one pieces, the polka dot one in particular, because Reese Witherspoon, while being a soft gamine, is somebody who I believe has a classic essence. So that leans into that as well. And the look is just so chic and polished, and it just really, really suits her. And it has that aspect of modesty that is in alignment with the classic essence. And I think that's why it's probably her best look. And then here we see her again in a one piece, but this time you can see that she has gained a little bit more weight as compared to the other images. And that weight collects in various places. It collects mostly in the places where we would have seen her fleshiness in that bikini photo. So you see it in her midsection, and you see it, there's a bit of flesh in her arms, and you see it in her upper thigh area as well. Unfortunately, I don't have a full image, a full length picture of her, but it creates a more squarish, she's still very curvy, and I don't think that'll go away, but it sort of shortens her because she's widening along the midsection. So she kind of looks, visually, she looks a little bit shorter, like she is condensed more so, but still very lush and very soft. As always with body types, there are always variations in how that body composition comes off on different people. And I think there's an aspect also of lifestyle, so how people, how active they are and what weight they maintain, that sort of thing, really creates this space where you have to understand what the general attributes of a body type are, yes, but also know that different people will show up differently. So case in point, here we have some Kibbe verified soft gamines who look very different to the small and petite, lush body type that we associate with this type typically, like what we saw for Reese Witherspoon. In the first image, French actress Audrey Tautou is incredibly petite, and there's really not a lot of softness to her that you can pinpoint. I think her additional softness is more visible in her facial features and perhaps the smallness of some of her limbs, that more so than on her physical body. And to the right of her is Mary Kate Olsen, and she is at a very low weight there. But you can also see that she really doesn't have any of that lush shaping. And it's possible that if she were to gain a little bit of weight, we'd be able to see that more so. But it's also possible that she would have a very similar body type to Audrey next to her and really not fill out. Interestingly, between the two sisters, I think Ashley has more of that curvy, natural curve to her that she maintained even at a smaller weight. So they're both verified soft gamines, but again, even for twins, that sort of body composition can be different. And then, of course, we have Halle Berry, and Halle Berry definitely embodies that softness and that lushness. Again, I see the angularity of her bone structure visible in her shoulders. There's just a sharpness to her bone structure, and there's a tapering to it. But on top of that, there is this lush flesh, and she has that hourglass figure that is very feminine and soft and has a particular delicacy to it. And you can see that that's how her composition happens, where she has that additional yin. And it's a bit difficult also because these women have never been overweight that I'm aware of. So it's difficult to speak about how that would affect how their bodies look now. But this is at least interesting to see how, when they are at their normal weight or a lower weight, there can be this great variation of how their bodies look. And then here we have another verified Kibbe soft gamine in Betty Davis, who's an American actress. She's obviously of that older Hollywood glamour time frame, but you can see in her body that she has, again, that petiteness and that softness. And even though she's wearing a very modest swimsuit, you can still see that little bit of softness in her midsection, and you can see it in her upper thigh area. And there's just a real delicacy and a smallness to all her features, even in her face. And that is almost textbook soft gamine. But again, this is about introducing that there is a great variation to this type, and hopefully that was useful in illustrating that. A soft gamine will not be tall, have a rail thin or extremely straight body type, have a large or broad bone structure, have large hands and feet or exotic facial characteristics, be symmetrical in body type, bone structure, or facial features, or have a sharp bone structure. Here are some soft gamine celebrities. Going from left to right, we have Octavia Spencer, Audrey Tautou, Reese Witherspoon, Tundra Newton, Halle Berry, and Betty White. And here is a list of Kibbe verified soft gamine women. And now let's discuss Kibbe soft gamine lines. Shape: crisp curves with sharp edges, rounded shapes that are smoothly formed, including bouffants, ovals, circles, elliptical shapes, chunky swirls, teardrops, and crisp clusters. So I see all of these at play to certain extents in these outfits that Octavia Spencer has on. I see swooshing and softness, and I see ovals, and I see a little bit of roundedness in the sleeves, for example, of that first shirt. Gives it a beautiful shaping, and that light fabric just looks wonderful on her. And the tapering of the pant as well is something that always is great for gamines, but just wonderful. That swoosh of the skirt in the middle creates a sort of elongated elliptical shape that balances well with the top of the dress, that is just very symmetrical. And I think that additional touch makes this work better for her type, while also giving her the shape. It's fitted at her waist and she looks great. And that last image is just lovely. She has that, again, swish across the shoulders. It has that little bit of asymmetry. And there's the delicacy of the fabric, but also juxtaposed with the fit of the midsection. So there's that bit of play in the fabric and fit. And I think she really just looks great. There's a softness to all of these. There isn't a great deal of sharp edges, but I think because she herself embodies more softness in her composition, the clothes that would look best on her are devoid of those sharp edges. She looks better when she has a little bit more softness, because that's how she shows up, that's how her body is made. So that's an important thing. The system is just about finding your composition and then emulating that when you choose outfits and fabrics and put them together so that they fall naturally and align with your body type. And I think she's doing a great job of that here. Avoid delicate, intricate shapes. So here we have Octavia Spencer again, and this time I think this outfit doesn't suit her because it is too delicate for her body type. Now, while I said she has a lot of yin, so a lot of softness, and the elements of this dress are very yin leaning. So there's a lot of lace, there's a sort of delicate trimming, the pattern feels very feminine and it overlaps. So there's just a lot of softness to it. But this would be more suitable to a completely yin type, so a romantic, rather than a soft gamine, because you have to remember that a soft gamine is a mix of opposites. So they have a great deal of yang that they have to honor, and this fails to do that. So it just feels a little bit off on her, even though it is cinching at her waist and giving her shape and all of these things. It's too delicate, and the very soft elements create an almost overt delicacy and intricacy that doesn't quite align with this type. Avoid symmetrical, even shapes. So these are, I mean, it's Halle Berry, so she always looks great. But I would argue that in both of these looks, she just looks fine. And it takes quite a lot to take away from her to that extent. And I think it's that lack of anything interesting really to look at these shapes, and they're just simple and symmetrical. The first look is better because it has more softness than the second one. So that little bit of softness in the shoulder, the fabric is kind of folded over into itself to create a sort of bouffant shape that makes it a little bit more delicate, and I think that works to her advantage. There's more of that bouffant in the skirt, so it's a little bit bubbly, and that gives it a little bit of additional softness. But overall, it's a plain black dress and just comes off as very boring. The one to the right is the real offender, because not only is it completely symmetrical, it does have a little bit of that bubbling effect on the sleeves, but everything else about it is overly sharp. So there's that sharp V neckline. The fabric itself feels very flat and sharp as compared to the one right next to it. It has a bit of a softer feel to it, almost a crinkliness that leans more yin. So this one leans more yang, and it also, then the skirt doesn't do any bubbling. It's just, I see a lot of triangles and straight lines in it. So there's a juxtaposition between her. The entire look is just too angular on top of being overly simple. And she really just sort of, it drags her down and she disappears a bit in it. Avoid ornate shapes unless they are very irregular and witty. So in this first look, I think the roses of this dress are a little bit too ornate, and there's too many of them all across the neckline as well as right at her hip. I like that there's a lot of visual elements. This is great for this type. There's something to look at. I think the dress itself has a lot of shaping, but the elements don't come together nicely. And I think a big part of why that is the case is because of that rose. It's funny because I feel like it adds a little bit of detail and it makes the dress interesting, but it's just a little bit too much and it pulls away. Personally, I would also give her a lower slit because I think her essences, which I'm not sure of her exact composition, but that doesn't seem to mesh well for her. So I think she has something romantic, but also something that requires a bit of modesty. So a grown kind of sexy versus this, which is very overt. So that's also throwing me off a bit. But overly ornate anything for this type is not going to mesh well with them. And in that last one, this dress has a complete lack of structure. And because of that, it sort of falls on itself and creates these shapes in her neckline where there is no clear line. It just falls in and creates these swirls, and it's very clingy. So it's very, very soft, but too soft. And again, it ignores the requirement for structure because the gamine has that yang component that is very present. So this creates shaping that I feel is too innate for the type because the fabric is too soft, and so the shapes that come out of it just become too delicate. Line and silhouette. Your silhouette is animated and staccato, composed of clean curves with sharply tailored nips and tucks at strategic edges. Your shapes are rounded because of your extra dose of yin, but they are crisp and formed, kept close to the body as opposed to softly flowing. The sharp edges are always present through the shoulders as well as tapering at the cuff, the collar, the waist, and the knee, and in details such as pleats, plaquettes, and lapels. All of these comes from your yang side, so that sharpness. Likewise, it's always best to keep a well-defined waist, small bouffant lines and crisp edges, small draped lines with tapered edges. Here you see Audrey Tautou and Halle Berry, and I think they're both doing a great job of meeting this. Audrey more so than Halle Berry, but I also think there's a lot of elements here that really work in her favor. So starting with her, that dress, for example, has those horizontal lines. So the purple dress with those white horizontal lines, and that creates that staccato effect. It cuts her body into small sections, which is great for this type because it's essentially a body type composed of small sections. But it also does a great job of maintaining the softness and the yin aspect of the soft gamine. So that soft draping at her neckline and the smallness of her bag, all of these things come together and she just looks incredibly elegant and she looks wonderful. That look devoid of those lines becomes a little bit more boring and will probably drag her down because of the length as well. But these little touches help to create a silhouette and an overall look that better suits her. And then for Audrey, she's doing all of the right things. I see the sharpness in the detail, and she carries more sharpness in her makeup. Again, this is important. Halle Berry has more softness to her than Audrey does. So the clothes that will suit them are going to lean differently. The dress that Halle Berry is wearing, for example, would not look good on Audrey because she carries more sharpness and more petiteness. So that dress will just drag her down entirely, and she wouldn't have the shape so that it would lean as feminine and delicate and beautiful as it does on Halle Berry, who carries that additional yin aspect to her. But Audrey, in these two looks, is working within her composition and really utilizing the aspects that make her shine. So the crispness in the high neckline and the folded sleeves of that blazer. So there's that, again, attention and highlighting of her smallness, the short length of the skirt, that sharp color contrast, and a bit of the flamboyant in that neckline. All of these things work beautifully to create a look that is simple yet elegant and sophisticated, and she looks amazing. And again, to the left of that, the shortness of the dress and the sharpness of the jacket. So there's that juxtaposition, but it's so fresh and chic. And she's pulled up her sleeves again. very edgy because her style leans a little bit more. There's an edge to her and a polish to her. So I wouldn't be surprised if she had something of a classic essence mixed with a Gamine essence. That would make sense. But she looks incredible in these looks. Avoid geometric silhouettes. So again, this dress by Halle Berry has all that sharpness and angularity that juxtaposes against her softness, and it doesn't suit her. In this dress, Audrey has this very sharp fabric for this shirt, and I feel like I can draw it with straight lines. It's like a rectangle over her body. It's just there. It really does nothing for her. I do like the crispness of the neckline and the cuffs because those elements suit her really well. But the actual shaping of the dress just creates a silhouette that doesn't flatter her at all. Avoid wide, unconstructed silhouettes. So again, Audrey is wearing that dress that just widens out at the skirt, and it messes with her proportions because she is a very petite woman. So widening her like that really doesn't do her any favors. But then there's also the very delicate nature of that fabric, which just feels too soft for her. And the overall look leans very mature. It's aging her. It feels very out of time. But the biggest offender, I would say, is the shaping of that skirt and the silhouette that it creates on her. Likewise, on Halle Berry, this dress is completely devoid of any structure. It's completely unconstructed, and she is just lost beneath it. The fabric isn't flattering. It's a mix mash of fabrics, but there's that overly delicate one on the top, and you can see that it's just very whimsical and very flimsy. So, not doing justice to her structure and her overall. Avoid soft and flowing silhouettes and symmetrical silhouettes. So, here I would say there's a couple of things going on with this dress that make it not flatter Halle Berry. The fabric itself is probably the worst thing, and how that fabric is cut to create this look. So there's all of that additional folding. There's an axis of fabric, and that axis of fabric creates all of these folds that are overly delicate and soft and feminine and overly flowy for this type. So she has, yes, that yin, but not enough to carry off this look. And the silhouette just feels too much for her. Avoid all strong horizontal lines. Avoid all smooth lines and severe straight lines. So the black dress is strong and horizontal. Reminds me a bit of that dress, that grey outfit by Audrey Tautou, where it widens her because it just creates that strong line across her thigh, and then there's nothing in the dress that softens it up. So this is doing the opposite of what the silver dress we just looked at, which was leaning too yin. This is leaning, in terms of elements, it's leaning more yang, and it's really leaving her behind. It just feels like somebody put something on her and it's cagey and it's stiff and it doesn't flatter her. And then the look to the right is made up of severely straight lines. And again, yes, she has structure, but she has that yin and additional yin at that on top of it. So this suit reads very dramatic, all straight lines, and would suit that type because again, it creates that long vertical line, which the gamine, soft gamine, does not have. So it just feels incredibly stiff and restricting and severe on her. Fabrics. Fabric should be lightweight and crisp so it can hold a defined shape that is tailored into the garment as well as be supple enough to have a slight drape and movement. Matte finish fabrics is best because it looks fresher on you, although slight sheens are fine too. Textures should be light, not heavy or bulky, and fairly crisp. Drapeable woven fabrics like jerseys, cashmere, etc., can be used very effectively when there is extra construction in the garment to provide a very defined outline. Knits should be soft and fluffy, although flat, clingy knits are effective when tailored into curvy shapes with rounded outlines. Metallics are excellent for evening but should be avoided during the day. So, in summary, there's a great deal of fabrics that are at play for this type, but it's important that the fabrics behave in such a way as to mimic the natural composition of the wearer. So again, like we were discussing Halle Berry and Audrey Tautou, this is going to look different on different people. Somebody like Halle Berry with more softness does her best when she follows fabrics that have a little bit more softness, not completely devoid of weight or structure, and the actual design of the dress will matter here. But that softness is very much in alignment with how her composition is. This is also true for someone like Octavia Spencer. But again, even for her, overly delicate fabrics won't work because she does require that structure. So it's all about a balance. And then somebody like Audrey has more of that angularity. So fabrics that keep their shape, but as long as they're composed in very small, sharp details that keep it fresh and make sure it's not boring, then she looks great. So I hope that makes sense. But there's a lot of fabrics that this type can play with. And the most important thing is to make sure that it meshes what is required for a soft gamine. So there's some structure and angularity, but then there's also some softness and a little bit more softness or a little bit less softness depending on how your personal composition is. Avoid heavyweight, thick, or bulky fabrics. So this is interesting too because I think Audrey actually looks great in her outfit. I do think the fabric itself is, and the jacket and the shaping of the jacket, slightly overpowering, but not too much. I still really like the look. I think it's done on purpose, and I think she's pulling it off really well. And everything else that she's wearing works to balance that jacket. There's a crispness in the shoes she's wearing, very tailored man style shoes. There's the tapered pant, and she's showing her ankle, and the bag itself is very angular. So, all of these things, she is balancing the then kind of soft, rounded shape of this big, oversized coat. So, the math allows her to pull it off. But typically, if she was wearing this jacket not with that outfit, and let's say she had something soft and delicate underneath it, that's where you start to see how it would take away from her more so than it does here. And it just is this big thing over her that is hiding her shape, but then the fabric of it as well has that weight to it that kind of clashes against her very delicate structure and features. On Halle Berry, this is easier to see because her knit fabric is very bulky and it feels very rough against her, and that should be avoided. Avoid overly flimsy, sheer, and clingy fabrics. So here you have in those first two images that green dress, very clingy and flimsy on her. And as discussed before, I just think it doesn't flatter her. It doesn't honor the yang aspect of her body type. Likewise, that image in the middle, way too soft, way too delicate, and way too drapey. There's no structure to it whatsoever, and it just clashes against her. And that final one is more sheer and too soft, too delicate, too intricate. The lace and the ruffles, all of it lean very youthful and feminine, and also without structure. She can handle feminine, but then when you add all those other aspects to it, it just becomes too separate from her. And lastly, avoid rough, thick textures. So again, this dress, it almost looks to me like it probably feels like a net and very rough to the touch, probably not comfortable to sit in. And it just doesn't do her any justice because she does have all of that softness. So for her, it's important to lean more so towards that softness and that flowy fabric and that delicacy. That's where she truly shines. And this is the opposite of that. So it just simply does not flatter her at all. Detail should always be animated, lively, and energetic. An access of detail, particularly in the area of trim, is one of the important ways you express vivacity in your appearance. Shoulders should be crisp and slightly padded. The pads should always add streamlined curves. Shoulder gathers, tucks, and shirring are excellent, as is any intricate trim or applique in this area. Necklines should be clean and crisp, preferably curved. They're best when they are either high or closed, although lower scoops and plunges are acceptable. Crisp collars are excellent and should be used profusely. They should be small and very tailored, or shaped with contrasting fabric, trim, color, etc. Curved or rounded shapes are best. So here we have again Audrey Tautou, and she is doing a great job of showcasing these incredible details that pull these outfits together. In that first one, there's that sharp contrast of color, so that black and white dress. There's that curved neckline that goes behind her neck to connect the shoulder to the then very sharp asymmetrical line that the white fabric creates with that dress. And it's very visually interesting and stunning, and I think a good balance of curved and sharp, which perfect for this type. But for her, it's leaning a little bit more sharp, which again is great for her because she has a little bit more angularity. In the middle, the outfit itself leans a little bit softer, but she's still doing a great job of maintaining those small, sharp lines. So that cutout in the chest is great, as well as that rounded bodice and how it connects to the white shoulder part of that dress, which has the sharper lines, but then again, the rounded neckline. So this juxtaposition and this sharp contrast in the colorway is great for her. The length is wonderful. And then there's that belt, which adds just another visual element and provides a sense of shaping, but not in a way to create curves, because again, that's not how her body is. But it just creates that staccato, that visual cut horizontally that breaks the look into segments. And it has that smallness and sharpness, very delicate, very interesting, and she looks great. And then in that last look where she's in streetwear, she's again doing all of these things. She has a lot of details in her outfit, which is great for this type. Gamine style is heavy on details because they look boring very quickly. And this varies, obviously, I think, depending on the person's essence blend. But generally speaking, these are people that need a lot of detail. So in this look, she's doing a great job of bringing that detail. This style is still very subdued, very chic, and very sophisticated, which suits her again because I think she does have some sort of classic essence to her. But you can see that belt adds color. The jeans themselves are cuffed to show her ankle, and the jacket is very fitted with a lot of sharpness in the shoulder. And she has that scarf that brings up the neckline, but also adds pattern and creates an additional visual element. And then the glasses, of course, add that pop of color. So she just looks amazing, and it's all because of those details. Small sharp pleats, ornate trim, applique, top stitching, etc. All of these are good touches for the bodice area. Crisp cuffs with contrasting buttons, bands, trim, and such are always chic. The waist should always be sharply defined with a waistband, contrasting trim, applique, etc. A tapered and cinched waist is a mainstay of your look. Gathers at the waist are excellent if they are small and crisp as opposed to deep and soft. The hemline should be tapered at the knee area. If it's long, it'll then flare out gently. If it's short, it'll be tulip shaped. Contrasting trim at the hemline is excellent. Contrasting and colorful trim is everywhere. So again, here, Audrey is doing a great job of pulling her looks together by having all of these small, sharp, vibrant details that take an okay look and send it over the top. In the first one, it's all about that collar. So she has that beautiful yellow collar. I love the sharpness of it. And I love that that same fabric again peeks out at the cuffs. So cuff detail for this type is excellent. And the contrast between the blue of the sweater, which is small and fitted, and the yellow of that collar and those cuffs is spectacular. And then she has that skirt that flares out, but it's okay because she has respected the her vertical by the length being just past the knee, so it doesn't swallow her up, and then it's anchored by that boot that is sharp and solid, and overall she just looks amazing. Likewise in the middle, this is a simple look, but that she has elevated through the use of interesting details. In particular, those buttons at her waist are great, and those suspenders add contrast to the shirt while connecting it to the pants, both literally, but also in the color. So it's the same color as the pant. Would have looked great if it was in a contrasting color too, but this is still amazing. I love the crispness of the cuffs and the collar of her shirt, always excellent. And her shoes have that very interesting detail where it's almost as if they have cutouts with some metallic detail, and it all just comes together to create a very chic and sophisticated yet fun and edgy look. And to the right, I think this look is probably her least flattering only because it has the most soft elements, but she still looks good because there's a respect of some of the things that are so core and foundationally Gamine. For example, the length of the skirt again is short, so she's not overwhelmed by it, even though it does flare out a bit. She does have that belt that adds sharp contrast and ties the look together. Her shoes have an angularity to them that helps to balance out the soft elements of the rest of the look. And the top, I think if the top had been more angular, this look would have been much better. So maybe even a turtleneck in a bright color that was clingy, like a soft, clingy fabric, would have looked amazing. This very open neckline leans more soft and is also like off the shoulder, so a lot more additional yin aspects. But I do like the zip, for example, in front breaks that one piece into two elements. So there's her segmenting the look visually into two parts. It's a lean into that staccato effect, and then of course that belt. So even with that, I think there's enough elements that make it okay. It's not as great as the first two looks, but it still worked because there was just a little bit of detail. But it does feel a bit lacking because of how important detail is for this type. Avoid minimal detail. So here we have both Halle Berry and Audrey looking very dull because there's nothing really to look at. They're both wearing these simple black dresses, and there's no color contrast, there's no patterning, there's no nothing that adds visual interest, and it's incredibly boring on both of them. For Audrey Tautu, I feel like it doesn't even look like her. If somebody told me this was somebody else, I would believe it because she's just so dragged down by this look. For Halle Berry, the shaping is flattering on her because again she has more of that yin aspect, but the dress is also it drags her down, and now the length feels like a problem, whereas she can carry this sort of length if all the other elements are present, but without them it just feels very draining on her and extremely dull. Avoid elongated detail. So here we have Audrey again, and I don't dislike this look. I think it has very great elements that work for her, and I think she looks wonderful. But that scarf detail does the job of sort of dragging it a little bit. It's funny because I understand why elongated detail is a problem for this type, but in the look that she's wearing here, that purple aspect becomes a thing that ties us looks together by giving us visual interest to look at, so it becomes a thing that makes it somewhat okay. Try to imagine that look without it and it would become incredibly boring. But generally speaking, because this is a very short type, they don't have any elongation to the structure of their bodies. Anything overly elongated makes them look even smaller in a way that isn't flattering. So that's the kind of detail that we would typically want to avoid. Avoid sharply geometric detail. So this dress on Halle Berry has very sharp elements. It feels very futuristic in that it's very cold and unfeeling, very straight lines, very sharply detailed, and the fabric itself has no movement. There's a heaviness to it and a sharpness to it. And against her, again, it juxtaposes against the parts of her that are very soft. So there's just too much geometry, and that sharp V of that dress and the polish of that, the color of that silver, and the way that the light bounces off it really creates a coldness that doesn't work for her. Avoid wide unconstructed detail. So this has the opposite problem. This is too soft, too unconstructed. There's no structure whatsoever, and she's just sort of there beneath it. This is also very wide, so she loses her shaping, and it really doesn't do much for her. It's like she just threw on some fabric. This would be true for most soft gamines who are petite. So any outfit that feels as though it's going to swallow you up is not ideal. And lastly, avoid overly antique detail. So here, this is again falling into that overly delicate and overly intricate category that takes away from this type by failing to honor their more yin aspects that requires a sense of structure and angularity and something that reads as masculine, for lack of a better word. In this outfit, everything is hyper feminine, and so there is that juxtaposition and a lack of alignment with the parts of this body type that have that yang. So this is really better suited to somebody who is all yin, like a romantic type. And even then, there is a lot of detailing that for a lot of people would kind of take away from their overall sophistication, which happens here in the case of Halle Berry. So you would have to be careful either way, but definitely if there's any aspect of yang within that body type, this kind of styling is to be avoided. Separates. Separates are effective when used with a very head to toe ensemble approach. Mix them together artfully, always picking up their specific theme, whether it be color, print, or fabric elsewhere in your outfit. So you want to go for looks that feel as though they were given thought. And the easiest way to do that is to create a style where the color is picked up again by a different aspect, but you want to mix it and have a lot of visual elements so that there is still that sense of edginess and fun. And this is going to also vary based on who is wearing the outfit because their essence blend, again, is going to come into play. But looking at these three women, I think they do a great job. Octavia Spencer in the first look, that black is the thing that is anchoring the entire look. So I pick it up in her hair and in the trim of that top, in her skirt, and in her shoes. But it's broken up because her shirt has that dynamic pattern that is sharply contrasted. So it's black and white. So it's very visually interesting. And then everything else just falls into place behind it. I also like that her shoes are strappy in that way that creates that staccato effect against her skin. So it's a very cool touch that is a nod to the Gamine styling. In the middle, she again has that navy being the anchor, and this look leans almost soft classic for me because it's almost too perfectly matchy in the way that she's used and reused the colors. So the white of the pant is also there in the white of the background of the fabric of the jacket she's wearing, and that blue is pulled by the shirt so that it's blue and white and it's beautiful. But I think that for her as a soft gamine, this look, she looks great. I love this outfit on her, but I think it would be elevated by an addition of some other visual element. So a bag perhaps in a fun color that just breaks it up. Nothing too big, otherwise it'll disrupt the harmony of this look, but just something to add to it. And She looks great in this look, even though I do think it's borderline soft classic. I think she looks wonderful in it because I do think she has a sort of classic essence to her as well. There's a requirement for refinement and sophistication to the way that she dresses. And I can see that because if I compare what she's wearing in the middle to what Audrey's wearing right next to her, I couldn't imagine Octavia Spencer wearing that outfit and looking as chic as Audrey does in it. So there's an essence difference between the two of them. And then looking at Audrey's outfit, right, she's also doing a great job of having that blue be a repeating element. There's the pale blue of the pant and then the darker blue in the checkered pattern of her shirt and repeated in her jacket. I love the pattern because it's got that very dynamic contrast of those colors in that checkered print. And the jacket is wonderful because it's slim, fitted to her body, and very short in length. So she's never overwhelmed by length. She's very good at picking lengths that suit her and honor her tiny frame. And then, of course, she has those shoes, which are just fun and very boyish, which suits her style very much. She looks very cool, very edgy, and just beautiful. Color. Your use of color should be bright and sparkling, with a multicolor palette of vivid, rich, and intense shades played against each other or on top of either a pale or deep background. Sharp color contrast is excellent on you. Color schemes can be as wild and unusual as you dare. The more shades you use, the more sophisticated the effect. So here we have Halle Berry in that first look. She doesn't have too much by way of color, but I do like that sharp contrast of the black and the white. The outfit she has on has a great deal of visual interest, and it's doing a great job of having details in places that would suit a Gamine type. So it's the black and white, which is wonderful, but this also has a very high collar, and that collar itself is trimmed well with that black edging. So that's very interesting. Again, with the cuffs of her hands. And then the skirt, which is short, which is great for this type, has those two horizontal lines. So again, that cutting off of the fabric and creating that staccato effect. A very interesting and fun and dynamic look that is great for this type. To the right of her, Audrey is wearing this beautiful dress, and I love the color play in it. So it has that navy and the red and the white, and this is staccato again in full effect, and she looks amazing. Repeated that red with the shoe, and she just looks very elegant, very much honoring what I believe is her classic essence, but at the same time, the requirements for a soft gamine. I think she looks great, and also that red is picked up in her lip, and she really looks lovely. To the right of her is Cyndi Lauper, who is wearing a very fun and dynamic black and white coat, and her hair is also this minty green, and she has that red lip. So a lot of color at play, very playful, but still very much in alignment with what could work for a gamine, and in particular a gamine with a gamine essence. And then to the right of that is Audrey again, and I love how she has used that bright pink belt to be that pop of color that breaks between the white shirt and the blue denim. And it takes this very simple outfit and elevates it, makes it more fun and more dynamic and more fitted to her body type. So again, this is very classic leaning, the outfit itself. And I think that works for her because it aligns with her essence as I see it. But that addition of the hot pink belt just takes it over the top and makes it align with her body type and her essence. So it becomes the perfect outfit for her. I really, really love how she looks in that. Of course, the denim is fitted and tapered at the ankle. She has pulled up the cuffs of her shirt. The collar is high and it has a bit of stiffness to it. So does the cuff of the shirt. So all of the things are just perfect and right for her. And she again has that pop of red lip that just, she looks spectacular. Avoid monochromatic color schemes. So this will age a soft Gamine very quickly because monochrome is incredibly boring for a type that requires as much visual detail as they do. When they are dressed monochromatically, you feel as though there's nothing to look at and you don't really know where to focus, and they disappear behind the simplicity of that color palette. So in this first look, Audrey, who again I have to commend for always knowing detail wise and silhouette wise how to honor her lines and best flatter herself. This look, color wise, is incredibly boring on her. But I love the pant. I love how it's cropped. I love that detail of the belt. I love the lip color. And her shirt again has that high neckline that's a little bit stiff, as well as the cuffs of her shirt. So even when she's doing it wrong, she's one of those people that it's difficult to find her looking bad because she intrinsically understands her body and the key elements required every time she dresses to complement her body. But in terms of color, yes, I do think this drags her down and she doesn't look as dynamic as she typically does. Likewise, Halle Berry. This look is just very much background, and but it's not that it's background and then it helps to highlight her and she's pushed to the forefront. It pulls her into the background as well. And I really feel that some color and some visual interest would help to, in both of their cases, really make them more dynamic and infuse them with more life. Avoid neutrals except as accents. So here Halle Berry is dressed in completely neutral tones, and again, it just feels very boring. I feel like I don't know where to focus. She's there. She just feels like background again. And when discussing this, it becomes important to speak about a person's color palette because this could look good on somebody else based on who it is. I do understand that, but I don't know what her color season is, and I don't want to make that the focus. But simply in these sort of neutral tones, it does drag her down. Avoid dark colors that aren't broken by vivid accents. So this is similar to the rest of it. She's there, and I think this look with just a little bit of color would have been very interesting. Even if it was just the bag and or the hat, it would have helped to make it more dynamic and more interesting because the pants, it has that bit of structure juxtaposed against the softness of the sweater. So that's working for her, and the sweater itself is not too bulky. So I feel like the outfit isn't terrible, but the fact that it really has no color to it just takes away from the overall look. Prints. You should use lots and lots of prints that are lively and animated. Bright colors, high color contrast, and outlined colors are all good choices. Shapes should be curved and intricate, but keep them crisp and animated instead of watercolor or blended. Size should be small to moderate. So here, I think these women look incredible in these prints. Halle Berry in that first look, I love the bright blue color on her and then the bright orange and white of the pieces within that pattern. And the shapes of it are very defined. There's circles, I see lines through it. So that thing is blending into each other. There is just that crisp nature to the pattern, and it looks great on her. To the right of her, Audrey Tautou also looks great in that black and white pattern. Black and white juxtaposed against each other, very dynamic. I also like the belt that she's used. That could have been a different color and it still would have worked great for this type. It is elongated detail, but it's not overwhelming. So I think that works. That pattern feels very lively and very fresh. It has that also zaggedy sort of feel to it. So there's a sharpness that I think works well. To the right of that, she is wearing that polka dot pattern. There's that crispness of the dots on the red, but also the vividity of the color, the red and the white, just great. And I love it on her. And lastly, Halle Berry, again, that very almost geometric pattern with the bright colors. It's very interesting, it's very clear, it's defined, and it's very lively. And she looks great. Avoid sharp geometrics and symmetrical prints. So here you have a very boring pattern on Halle Berry, and it's because of that symmetry to it, but also the geometry of this. Because it's so perfectly symmetrical, it's almost as though she's not wearing a pattern because it's so perfectly uniform. And this type, they look best when the pattern is a little bit irregular, defined but irregular, and that makes it come to life. So this feels very stale and boring on her. And then there is the sharp geometry of all those sharp lines and the sharpness of the shoulders. And it really feels like this was drawn with a ruler, and that isn't something that could work for this type. Avoid oversized and abstract prints. So here I dislike this look. I think the top part of it is in itself not flattering because it has that very overt delicacy, which would have been fine maybe if the bottom wasn't what it was. But just as a complete look, I don't think it's one of Audrey's best. But that skirt is, in this case, the true offender. That pattern is just very, it's a lot, but not in a way that I think is great. I think because she is a Gamine type, there's allowance more so than we would have for a different type. But even for her, I find the skirt to be very overwhelming because of that print. It feels very childish on her, and it doesn't have the amount of sophistication that she requires for her looks to be harmonious, and it just feels very separate on her. Avoid watercolor soft blends without a crisp outline. So here we have more of those abstract sort of prints that don't have defined shapes as we saw earlier. And you can see that the color aspects of it. For example, in the blue dress, I love that. I love the purple pops of color and the blue against the darker blue, the soft blue. That is cool. But the shapes themselves and even the fabric of this dress, the ruffles, it all leans very delicate. And then the watercolor aspect, also very delicate, so that this dress as a whole is too soft for Halle Berry. To the right of it, that dress also has this sort of pattern that doesn't have any definition, and it just feels like a swath of color and swooshes over her. It doesn't harmonize well with her. It's just a lot, but not in a great way. And that first dress again, that purple dress with the slit, the dress itself is fine, but that pattern is just very youthful in a way that doesn't do her justice. It feels a little bit chaotic. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you like the content that I'm creating, or if you want to discuss anything I touched on in the video, please do so. Leave me a comment. Also, like the video and, of course, subscribe and turn on those notifications. I'll see you on the next one.